The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the Walker Ranch, casting long, stark shadows across the dusty Texas landscape. Thomas Walker, his weathered hands stained with motor oil, was bent over the engine of his old John Deere tractor in the equipment shed. At 62, he'd learned that mechanical work served two purposes. It saved money, and more importantly, it kept his hands and mind occupied. The ranch had been quieter these past 9 years, a profound silence that had settled in like the dust itself ever since Savannah disappeared. He was tightening a fan belt when he heard the distinctive crunch of tires on the gravel road leading to the house. Looking up through the shed's wide open door, he spotted a Brewster County Sheriff's patrol car kicking up a plume of dust as it approached. Thomas grabbed a greasy rag from his back pocket, wiping his hands as best he could. It had been a long while since law enforcement had come calling about Savannah's case. The first year, their visits had been a regular, painful punctuation to his grief. By year 3, they had stopped entirely. Thomas walked out to meet them, squinting against the bright, high desert sun. 2 officers stepped out of the patrol car. One he recognized as Deputy Martinez, a decent young man. The other was an officer he didn't know. "Afternoon, officers," Thomas called out, his voice raspy from the heat and disuse. He continued working the rag between his fingers, a nervous habit he couldn't shake. "What brings you out this way?" Deputy Martinez removed his wide-brimmed hat, a gesture of solemnity that immediately put Thomas on edge. That was never a good sign. "Mr. Walker, we need to talk to you. We found something." "Something?" Thomas felt his chest tighten, a familiar cold dread creeping up his spine. "We believe we found the truck your daughter was using the night she disappeared." Thomas let out a short, sarcastic laugh, a harsh sound in the quiet air. "After 9 years? Where'd you find it, at the bottom of the Rio Grande?" The officers exchanged a look, and Martinez's expression remained deadly serious. "No, sir, it was buried, deep in the ground, out in the desert just outside the Terlingua ghost town." "Buried?" Thomas shook his head, the word not computing. "That's impossible. You're telling me someone buried a whole truck?" "An oil drilling crew found it," the younger officer explained, his voice respectful. "They were setting up a new drilling station at an old, disused site. When they started drilling, they hit metal. Turned out to be your daughter's truck." Thomas stared at them, the grease rag falling from his suddenly numb fingers. The absurdity of it was overwhelming, a plot from a bad television show. But the unwavering gravity in the officer's expressions told him this was no joke. I can hardly believe that," he muttered, his voice losing its defiant edge. "We need you to come with us, Mr. Walker," Martinez said gently. "We need you to identify the truck. Confirm it's the one Savannah was driving. It's a crime scene now." Thomas nodded slowly, his mind a whirlwind of questions and long-dormant emotions. Let me secure things here." He turned and called out to Manuel, his ranch foreman, who'd been mending a fence in a nearby pasture. "Manuel, I need you to watch the place. I've got to go with these officers." Manuel jogged over, his face etched with concern. "Everything okay, boss?" "They found Savannah's truck," Thomas said quietly, the words feeling alien on his tongue. "I'll be back when I can." He climbed into the back of the patrol car, the vinyl seat hot against his work jeans. The drive to the site took nearly an hour and a half, winding through the sparse, beautiful, and cruel desert landscape he knew so well. As they neared Terlingua, he could see the activity from a distance. A cluster of official vehicles, their lights flashing silently under the vast blue sky, all centered around what looked like a small-scale drilling operation. The scene was one of organized chaos. State police and county deputies had established a wide perimeter with yellow tape. At the center of it all sat a pickup truck, rust-stained and caked in ochre-colored dirt, suspended by heavy chains from a mobile crane. Behind it gaped a massive raw hole in the earth where the drilling equipment had broken through. Thomas stepped out of the car, his legs feeling unsteady. A man in a suit, his posture rigid in the heat, approached. "Mr. Walker?" It was Detective Rodriguez from the state police, an investigator who'd worked Savannah's case in the early, frantic days. "I'm sorry we're meeting again under these circumstances." Thomas shook his hand, his eyes fixed on the resurrected truck. Rodriguez guided him toward a heavy-set man in an oil company hard hat. "This is Jim Patterson from Permian Drilling. Jim, tell Mr. Walker what you told us." Patterson cleared his throat, his gaze sympathetic. "Well, sir, this location was marked in our surveys as a disused drilling site from the 1960s. When my crew arrived this morning, we noticed a large boulder sitting right on top of where the old wellhead should have been. Seemed strange. Usually old wells are just capped and marked." Thomas nodded, trying to focus, his mind replaying 1,000 memories of Savannah in that truck. "We moved the boulder," Patterson continued, "and ran our standard ground penetration tests. But the old equipment must have interfered with the readings because we didn't detect anything unusual. Started drilling to reopen the well, and about 15 feet down we hit something that wasn't rock or soil. The drill operator knew right away." "So you dug it out?" Thomas asked. "Had to. Took us 3 hours with the excavator to carefully uncover it. Soon as we saw it was a vehicle, we called the authorities. I mean, why would anyone dump a truck down an old oil well unless they were trying to hide something permanent?" Thomas moved closer, ducking under the yellow tape. Despite 9 years underground, the truck was remarkably intact. The desert's dry climate had mummified it, preserving it better than he would have expected, though rust had claimed the undercarriage and wheel wells. The front windshield was a spiderweb of shattered glass where the industrial drill had punched through. "Someone dumped this here deliberately," Thomas said, his voice tight with a cold fury. "This is miles from Savannah's usual route. She would never have driven out here." "We found no human remains in or around the vehicle," Detective Rodriguez said. "But yes, this is clearly a crime scene. Someone went to considerable effort to hide this." "Can I see what was inside?" Thomas asked, his throat dry. Rodriguez led him to a provisional tent set up nearby. Under the harsh glare of portable lamps, a folding table displayed a series of evidence bags, each meticulously labeled. Thomas's breath caught. He recognized Savannah's possessions instantly. Her worn leather wallet with the turquoise snap, a simple hair tie with strands of her dark, wavy hair still wound through it, her small silver cross necklace, the one that had belonged to her mother. "These are hers," Thomas confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. He pointed to a multi-tool. "That's mine. I gave it to her for emergencies." His finger moved to a tire pressure gauge. "That's mine, too. Told her to always keep it in the truck." A commotion near the side entrance drew their attention. Sheriff Clayton Ridge's official SUV pulled up, dust swirling around it. The sheriff emerged, a large man who filled out his uniform, adjusting his hat as he surveyed the scene. "Sorry I'm late," the sheriff said, slightly out of breath. "Got held up at a traffic accident out on Highway 118. 3-car pileup." Rodriguez nodded. Sheriff Ridge turned to Thomas, his expression softening into one of practiced sympathy. "Thomas, I'm real sorry about all this. I know we searched for 9 years, and to finally find something like this. It's good we found the truck," Thomas said carefully, measuring his words. "But my daughter is still missing." "Forensics has collected everything they could find," Rodriguez assured him. "Hair fibers, possible trace blood samples, fingerprints, if any, survived. It'll take a few days at the lab." The oil supervisor, Patterson, approached the sheriff. "Sheriff Ridge, can we resume operations in the surrounding area?" We've got contracts to fulfill." "No," the sheriff said firmly. "This is a crime scene now. I'm expanding the perimeter. We'll have an excavation team go over the whole area." Rodriguez checked his phone. "I need to head back to the station, review the old case files. I'll drive Thomas home." "No, I'll take him," Sheriff Ridge offered quickly. "There's something I need to discuss with him anyway." Thomas looked between the two men, then nodded, a feeling of unease settling in his stomach. He followed the sheriff to his SUV, taking one last look at the truck that had held its secret for 9 long years. The drive back to the ranch was mostly silent. When they pulled up to the main house, the sheriff cut the engine. "Mind if we talk in your office, Thomas? I need to go over some things with you." Thomas led the way to his small office at the back of the house. The room was lined with photos of cattle shows and, most prominently, a picture of Savannah on her horse, smiling, her eyes full of life, taken just months before she disappeared. The sheriff settled into the chair across from the desk, pulling out a small notebook. "Thomas, I need you to walk me through that night again. I know it's been a long time." Thomas sighed, the story a well-worn path in his mind. He recounted the evening, Savannah leaving around 8 p.m. to move cattle, his own work on the ranch accounts, his growing unease when she hadn't returned by 11 p.m., and his solitary drive out to the grazing land. "I found the cattle, but no sign of Savannah or the truck," Thomas said, his voice growing quiet. "I wasn't too worried at first, Clayton. She was 28, an independent woman. I figured maybe she'd had truck trouble. But when I woke up the next morning and she still wasn't here, that's when I called you folks." The sheriff scribbled notes, then looked up, his expression unreadable. "You said you were here in the office between 8 p.m. and when you went to look for her. Can anyone verify that?" Thomas straightened in his chair. "Verify it? Why would anyone need to verify it? What time exactly did you go looking for her? And why weren't you worried enough to search more thoroughly or call us immediately?" The questions came faster now, the sheriff's tone shifting from conversational to interrogatory. Heat rose in Thomas's neck. "Clayton, what the hell is this about? You think I had something to do with this?" "I didn't say that, Thomas," the sheriff replied calmly. "But we have to explore all possibilities. In these kinds of cases, sometimes family members are involved." "You're wasting your time," Thomas said, his voice hard as ironwood. "I am 62 years old. You think I could bury a truck under 15 feet of desert in one night without anyone noticing? What about your ranch staff? Where were they?" Thomas slammed his hand on the desk. "Now you're suspecting my whole damn ranch? Manuel's been with me for 20 years. I'd like to question them again. With all due respect, Sheriff, I don't respect what you're doing right now." Thomas leaned forward. "You want to do something useful? Pull the traffic CCTV footage from that night. Look for heavy trucks, excavation equipment, something that could actually move that much dirt." The sheriff shook his head. "At this phase, that's not necessary. I know how to do my job, Thomas." "Do you?" Thomas stood up, his patience gone. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're more interested in pointing fingers at me than finding who really buried that truck. We're done here. If you want to talk to me again, it'll be with Detective Rodriguez present." He walked the sheriff to the door and watched him drive away, fists clenched at his sides. The man who was supposed to be helping him had just treated him like a suspect. The Dusty Spur Tavern was a local institution opening at 4 p.m. sharp. Thomas needed a drink. He took a seat at the bar, the cool, dark air a blessed relief. "Whiskey neat," he told Jake, the bartender. The local news was on the TV, showing footage of his daughter's truck being lifted from the ground. "Tom, I saw the news," Jake began. "Please don't ask," Thomas cut him off. Jake, understanding, changed the channel to sports. "Hey," a voice called from a back table. I was watching that. The man who'd complained got up and moved to the bar, taking a seat one stool over. He was in his mid-40s with tired eyes. "You from around here?" Thomas asked, breaking the silence. "No, just got in. Drove down from New Mexico," the man said, extending a hand. "Barry Granger." "Thomas Walker." "What brings you to Alpine?" "Looking for my brother, actually, Terry Granger. He's a police officer here." Or he was. Thomas nearly choked on his whiskey. "Terry Granger? From traffic enforcement?" "That's him. You know him?" Barry's face lit up with hope. Thomas gestured vaguely toward the TV. "That truck they found, it belonged to my daughter." Barry's expression crumbled. "Oh God, I'm so sorry, I had no idea." He paused. "Why are you here alone? Where's Terry?" "That's just it, I can't find him," Barry said, his frustration evident. "Went to the police department, they told me he quit 9 years ago. Nobody seems to know where he went." 9 years ago. The words hung in the air. The same time Savannah vanished. "Wait," Thomas said. "Now that you mention it, I remember someone telling me Terry moved to Mexico." "Mexico?" Barry looked stunned. "He never told me. Why would he just leave?" Thomas's mind was racing. Terry had been one of the officers on the initial investigation. He'd been helpful, professional. "Someone at the station must know more," Thomas said. "Detective Rodriguez is working with me. He'd know." He finished his whiskey. "Come with me. The station's not far. We'll see what the detective knows about Terry." As they walked out into the sweltering heat, a nagging feeling tugged at Thomas. An officer quitting his job and moving to another country right after a local girl went missing? It felt like more than a coincidence. At the station, the desk officer, Patricia Hernandez, told them Detective Rodriguez had stepped out. "But the sheriff is pulling in now," she said, pointing through the window. Thomas and Barry stepped outside, expecting Sheriff Ridge to emerge from his SUV. But he remained inside, his silhouette visible through the tinted windows, clearly on a phone call. As Thomas walked toward his own truck to grab his phone charger, he passed behind the sheriff's vehicle. The windows were cracked for ventilation, and he could hear the sheriff's voice carrying on the warm, still air. "Handle it quickly," the sheriff was saying. "Bones. Yes, find the bones." Thomas tried not to eavesdrop, fumbling with his keys. "Not Terry Granger, no one cares," the sheriff's voice continued, low and venomous. "Don't worry. New guy in the office?" "Yes." Thomas froze, his hand on his truck door. Terry Granger. The sheriff's engine suddenly roared to life, and the SUV began backing out. "Get in the car," Thomas said urgently to Barry. "What? Why?" "I think I just overheard something I wasn't supposed to. Just get in." They pulled out of the parking lot, following the sheriff's SUV as it turned onto the main road. "He was talking about your brother," Thomas said, his hands tight on the wheel. "Said no one cares about him, and something about bones." Barry's face went pale. Thomas's suspicions, vague and unsettling before, now coalesced into a single terrifying thought. The sheriff was involved. They followed in tense silence. The sheriff was pushing the speed limit, driving with an urgency that felt like flight. Thomas dialed Detective Rodriguez, switching to speakerphone. "Thomas," the detective answered. "I assume you're calling about the drilling site." "No," Thomas interrupted. "I need to ask you about Officer Terry Granger." After a long pause, Rodriguez confirmed the official story. Terry had suddenly quit and moved to Mexico 9 years ago. Thomas quickly explained his confrontation with the sheriff and what he'd just overheard. "We're following him now, Detective. Something's not right." "Thomas, that's not a good idea," Rodriguez warned. "He's turning," Barry interrupted. The sheriff's SUV had veered onto a dirt road leading toward an old, dilapidated farmhouse. "Detective, I'll call you back," Thomas said, ending the call. He pulled off the road, killing the engine and lights, and they watched. The farmhouse was not abandoned. There were lights in the windows. The sheriff's SUV stopped halfway up the drive. Another car approached from the house. Several men got out of the second car. They moved to the back seat and pulled someone out. Even from a distance, it was clear the person was bound and blindfolded, stumbling as they were dragged toward the sheriff's vehicle. With a growing horror, Thomas and Barry watched as the bound person was shoved into the trunk of the sheriff's SUV. He never even got out of his car. "Call Rodriguez now," Thomas said, his voice a low growl. As Barry dialed, Thomas watched the sheriff's SUV pull away, continuing down the road into the gathering dusk. He started his own engine. He was not letting that car out of his sight. With Detective Rodriguez on the line, Thomas and Barry tailed the sheriff's SUV through the darkening landscape. "Someone at the station must have tipped him off about the BOLO, Rodriguez said, his voice tight with frustration. "He's changed direction." The sheriff's vehicle finally turned onto a rough dirt track leading to an abandoned ranch, the old Hartley place. "He's pulled in," Thomas reported. "Do not approach," Rodriguez commanded. "Units are en route." They watched from the darkness as Sheriff Ridge got out, opened his trunk, and struggled with the weight of the person inside. The figure was limp, either unconscious or too weak to resist. He half carried, half dragged them into the dark maw of an old stable. Minutes later, like ghosts, police vehicles converged on the ranch. No sirens, no lights. Officers swarmed out, surrounding the buildings. From inside the stable, Thomas heard a woman's cry for help. "Go, go, go!" an officer shouted, and the tactical team stormed the stable. The night erupted in chaos, shouts, the sound of a struggle, calls for medical support. Sheriff Ridge was brought out in handcuffs, his face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this, Walker," he snarled. Then officers emerged from the stable, supporting a woman between them. She was thin, frighteningly so, her clothes torn and dirty. But even in the poor light, even after 9 years, Thomas knew her. "Savannah," he breathed. He rushed forward as she swayed, catching her in his arms. She was alive. She buried her face against his neck, her body shaking with sobs. "Dad," she whispered. "I knew you'd find me. I knew you wouldn't give up." An officer approached Rodriguez, holding up the sheriff's phone. "Detective, we just got an incoming message. Someone sent coordinates. Says that's where they're burying the bones." "Bingo," Rodriguez said grimly. The pieces were finally clicking into place. In the sterile, bright chaos of the emergency room, Dr. Chin gave Thomas the clinical, brutal summary of Savannah's 9-year ordeal. Malnutrition, abuse, old fractures, infections. He explained that she'd been held captive, a pawn in a corrupt bargain between Sheriff Ridge and a drug cartel led by a man named Miguel Salazar. Later in her hospital room, Savannah, though weak, told him everything. She had stumbled upon a drug deal that fateful night. Salazar's men caught her, and the sheriff, instead of reporting it, had seen an opportunity. He had them keep her alive, a secret, horrifying perk of his protection racket. He had them bury her truck at the abandoned oil well, a place he knew would never be disturbed. And tonight they were going to move her across the border while planting pig bones in the desert to fake her death, closing the case for good. She also told him about Terry Granger. The honest cop had grown suspicious of the sheriff's handling of the case. When he confronted Ridge, he, too, was handed over to the cartel, forced into slave labor for 8 long years. As dawn broke, Thomas stood in the hospital hallway. Barry Granger approached him, his eyes red-rimmed but filled with a profound relief. "I just saw him," Barry said. "Terry, he's alive. They told me everything." He extended a hand. Thomas, thank you. If we hadn't met at that bar, if you hadn't followed your gut. Thomas shook his hand firmly. A father doesn't give up on his daughter. No, Barry said, his voice thick with emotion. And a brother doesn't give up on his brother. They stood together, two strangers united by a nightmare. The scars from this long night would last a lifetime for all of them. But Savannah was alive. Terry was free. The web of corruption was being torn apart, and in the harsh light of a new Texas day, justice, after 9 long years in the dark, was finally beginning to see the sun.